We're at 169 Elliott Street, and we're John and Kathy are here with, and I'm here. I'm Nana, and we're ready to answer any questions John might have.
No, not so much me. We're going to go to family.
Oh,
But now
I'll jump in. Huh? Well, do it quickly. The new technology. No, what we're going to do now is just have Kathy start up
can
the
you
family.
erase that? Erase
Oh,
that?
yeah. We can just edit the tape, but I'm going to keep it going.
It's a number from Philadelphia, PA. So
Yeah, all right. So, Kate, you want to...
Philadelphia, PA. We'll ignore it.
Yeah, but explain what the purpose of this is.
I see here an echo, John. Is that right?
Huh? Where are you hearing the echo?
Oh, it's my voice from the kitchen. We're here today to talk to Nana K. Mullen about her life and to hear what it was like to grow up in Newton Upper Falls and to be someone who has had 91 years of experience in the world and how she thinks, looking back, what the important things in her life were.
It sounds pretty good so far.
What are your earliest memories of being in this house?
The earliest memories of being in this house would be of my mother and father, and my father going off to work at 5 in the morning, and he had a way of putting shoes on that I don't think anyone else in the world would have ever done. He took the shoes, he took newspapers, and he curled them up and put them between his toes and inside the shoes, and that was his way he wore shoes in the very cold weather.
And what was your father's name?
My father's name was Michael J. Carter, and he was very nice. He liked to read. He read the newspaper every day. We always had a newspaper delivered, even in poor days.
What did he do?
He worked, first of all, he was a gardener. He worked over in Warburn for some gardener, and he planted, and he was known for making new plants, and also he was known for the bushes that he made, and he grew from very small plants, and he encouraged them and made them to grow big.
And did he plant them just for his job, or did he plant them around the house?
Well, he planted where he worked. He did a lot of work for the Warburn Library, and then he worked for the nursery at in Warburn. I don't know the name of it because I don't remember it.
And what about the church? Did he do any planting at the church?
Oh, the church, yes, he did. He used to take home in his hat small plants of bushes, and he encouraged them to grow at home. And we had big areas where he was growing new bushes and new plants. And he took some of those bushes and he brought them up to Mary Immaculate of Lourdes and planted them outside the church, because at that time the church was changing. It was the church was changing. What was it changing? It came from Oak Street
Right.
up to Elliott Street, and it was an all new and a new church building actually, and he planted the bushes outside the church, and he'd go there every day to water and to make sure that they were doing all right. So that was his contribution to Mary Immaculate of Lourdes.
But can we just start from the beginning? When did your mother and father come from Ireland, and how did they meet?
My mother and father came from Ireland. They came on separate ships. My father left home because he had to leave home because they had no money to keep going and to feed them, and also the same situation with my mother. And so they came over from Ireland separately, and then they stayed here for a short time. I think they went to visit my mother went to visit Auntie Catherine in South Boston, and then she must have decided to go back to Ireland to see her mother because she missed her so much. And then the same situation, no money to stay home. So she came back, and on the ship coming back, she met my father, and they, I don't know just how it progressed, but anyway, they came here, and they both knew my father's relatives, and Auntie Kenny and Auntie Terry, and my father stayed with them, and my mother stayed with her sister, Catherine Hayes, in South Boston. And actually, she got married from South Boston, and she was dating my father, and they apparently got along very nicely. So they decided to get married, and they got married down in Newton Center at the Sacred Heart Church. And my mother, we have pictures of my mother, and she wore a beautiful dress that is gorgeous. And anyway, they started their life, and they started living down in Newton. They got an apartment in Newton Highlands, and they lived there. And that's where my brother Ted was born, was in Newton Highlands. And then my father...
And your brother Ted's name is actually Cornelius.
He was actually Cornelius, and he was named after my father's father, who was Cornelius. And they when they were living in Newton Highlands, my father found out about a house that was for sale, and it was from the Barney estate, which was a big estate, but apparently the Barneys were getting very old and decided to sell off parts of it, and they sold off a part of their lot, and he bought about an acre of land and a house in poor condition. And what else can I say?
And your mother, her name was Ellen Cotter, but before it was Cotter, what was it?
Her name was Sullivan, and before she and Auntie Catherine's name was Sullivan, and the other one that she was very friendly with was another sister that came over, Auntie Margaret, and Peggy was named after her, after Auntie Margaret, and she was a very kind, lovely woman, and they started their life. And also, let's see, who was born here? I'm not the first one. My brother John was born here. Peggy was born here, and John, and Dick, and then me. And Dick and I went to school at Emerson School, which is right up the street from us.
How much older was Dick than you?
Dick was a year and a half older than I was.
And how much older was Peggy?
Than me.
Right.
Oh, she was quite a bit, maybe about 5 or 6 years, anyway. And she
was older than you. So you were closer to Dick growing up because
oh yes,
he was
very much so. One of my first memories of going to school at Emerson School was we came home every noontime for lunch, and I was running down the street to get home. I was so anxious to see my parents, and there I saw an ambulance at the bottom of the driveway, and I saw a stretcher being pushed down this driveway. We had a big driveway that went up to our house, and this in the driveway was my father. And I ran to my father to tell him to get out, Daddy. And he couldn't talk to me. He had a very serious sickness. It was called erysipelas, and it was a swelling of his brain. And I don't know how he ever got it. He was taken to Newton Wellesley Hospital, and thought he was not going to live, but he did. And he came home, and he recuperated in this nice house that I'm living in now.
How old were you when that happened?
I was at the kindergarten.
Wow.
So, but it made a big impression on me.
Sure. So, when you were growing up, it was the Depression. What was that like?
The Depression? Depression was this time we didn't have money to go to the grocery store, and we did have two of my father's sisters that lived right near us. One right on property adjacent to our property, Auntie Terry, and she would give us muffins every day, and I'd go to the fence, and she'd give me some muffins of bread to eat. And also Auntie Kenny lived on on not Mechanic Street, but Chandler Place, and she would give us food to eat, and we were very grateful for that. And they both their husbands had jobs, and my father didn't have a job, and his job at the greenhouse in Woburn was dissolved because they sold it, and he didn't have anything. And a friend of ours applied to the city of Newton for my father to have a job, and he did get this job, and he was very grateful for it.
So what was it like living here? There were trees that had apples and pears, and did you keep chickens as well?
Yes, we kept chickens, and we had eggs, and we picked the eggs up every morning, and the chickens, I don't know how much care they took, but they lived up in a little house on the top of our property that my father had built.
And who would be in charge of the chickens and getting them ready to eat?
Getting them ready to... Oh, my mother, of course. My mother did all that kind of work. She took care of the chickens and would go every day she'd go up to their house and put out food for them and to eat.
And what about when you had to lop their heads off because you were going to have them for dinner?
When we needed a chicken to eat, my mother would tell my father, we need to have a chicken. And so he would look around to see the fattest chicken he could see. And then he had what he called a chopping block. I think it still might be out in the backyard. And he'd put the head on a chopping block, and with a sharp utensil, cut their heads off. And they run around the yard, squawking away, a big loud noise, and no head. And it was fun. Wasn't funny. It was sad. We'd run in the house and get away from it.
So not only did you have to live through the Depression, but you also lived through World War II. What was that like?
Well, World War II was sad because my brothers, it disrupted our family. My brother Dick got a notice that came special delivery from the government saying that he had to report to the city hall at 8 o'clock in the morning, and which he did. And
How old was he?
My brother Dick was just out of high school.
18 maybe? 17,
perhaps
18?
And so...
Was your father too old to be drafted?
No, he tried to get in the service. Oh, he tried twice to get in the service, but he had what did he have, bad feet?
Oh, you're talking about Daddy. You're talking about John Mullen. He had flat feet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, but I was talking about her father.
But what about your father?
Oh, my father. I don't know why. He apparently was because he was married, and they didn't call him to go in the service. I don't think he had any choice, but they did. They were taking the younger people at that time, and therefore they took my 3 brothers. And
all of them had to go? Did they all go at the same time or at different times?
No, they all went different times. And my brother Dick was the most impressive time because my mother and I got on a bus and with Dick and rode down to the city hall, and he had to appear on the steps of the city hall with other people, other young men that were drafted, and they played music and said goodbye to them and good luck and all that sort of thing. And we stood there and cried our eyes out. We were just so sad because my brother was going.
And what about when John and Ted went? What was it like?
That
when they
was
went?
different. They weren't called like that. They volunteered to go. And where Dick didn't want to go,
Right.
He was drafted.
And what happened to him during the war?
He was in a D-Day in the war, and right away on the first day he was wounded, and he shot in his both legs, and so he was sent to Fort Devens for recuperation of the service, and he was there for quite a while recuperating, and he was on crutches. He couldn't walk for a long time, and then he did walk with a cane, and then he met his wife Dottie, and while he was recuperating, I think she went to visit the veterans who were sick and wounded, and that's how I think he met her. And
so, did you know Dottie before she met Uncle Dick?
Yes, I met Dottie and through a friend of ours. I forget who it was. I forget who the friend was that introduced us. And so Dottie played the bass drum, and she was already very much involved with the veterans, and she wore a uniform and marched all the time. Any time that they had a march, she was there. And so then she brought me in, and I took drumming lessons, and I played the snare drums, and I participated in any march there was to participate in.
And what was the communication like from the three brothers? Did they write home, and what did they say in the letters?
Oh, my brother Dick wrote all the time. He wrote what do they call them?
Telegrams or email?
No. But anyway, he wrote constantly, and my brother Ted wrote constantly, all the time. We had a letter from him all the time.
And what were the letters, upbeat, or did they reflect what was going on in the war? What were they telling you about what was going on?
No, they didn't refer at all to what was going on in the war. And
did you
he
write?
did tell me about
Yeah, go ahead.
about the food that they got us in the service, and how he wanted to come home. That's all he wanted.
And did you write back to him?
Oh, all the time. Yes. In fact, I have kept his letters. They are somewhere downstairs, and they're very interesting letters. And now Ted wrote all the time too. What were they called? Emails?
No.
They weren't. But there was some name for the mail that the servicemen
Couldn't have been
could.
telegraphs. That was too short.
No.
There was some name for the mail that the servicemen could use.
And how did your mother feel having three sons off to war? I mean, how did she take it?
Well,
And your father?
She missed them, and she spent a lot of her time writing to each one of them, and telling them news of home. That's always news of home. That's what they were concerned about, and so then.
And she would do some knitting, and volunteer, doing some knitting.
Oh, she did. She volunteered over at Newton Wellesley Hospital, and a bus would come and pick her up and take her over to the hospital, and she would do knit and sew and anything they could do for the veterans. But there was great communication with the families, with the veterans.
And how did you find out that Dick was wounded?
Well, where I was out on the front steps, I remember, someone from the government came up, walked up the driveway, and said, "Where's Mrs. Carter?" And he said, "I have sad news for you. Your son has been wounded." And we didn't know how bad he was or what, but anyway, and he said where he was going to be, and the first time we went to visit Dick, the government sent a bus and took us to visit, and he was in the hospital at Fort Devens.
And how did he seem to you the first time you saw him?
He was good. He was optimistic. He thought he was glad to be away from the war, and glad that it was only the wounds he had. And then, of course, he met Dottie. I think after he was wounded, and she met her through the veterans, and he was very anxious about Dottie. Always wanted to be sure I got in touch with her and so forth.
So what was your life like while they were away fighting? What was your life like living here in Newton?
My life went on as usual. I 1943. Let's see. I graduated from high school, and the end of the war came very quickly.
How did you keep up with the war? Did you know it was going well, or was it going bad? Were you listening to the radio? I mean, what?
We listened to the radio constantly. We had a radio, and my father was always listening to the radio, and
And where they get? I mean, it would have been all propaganda at the time, so you would have thought the war was going well. You were thinking, right? Or
well, I guess so. I think we probably thought it was going well, but anyway, from the letters that we got from my family, they were very encouraging, and all they wanted to do was to get home.
And at some point, your father died. When was that?
My father died. My goodness, I forget the year.
You were young. How were you still in high school?
I wasn't in high school. I had graduated from high school, and I was working in Boston, and for Judge Weston, and he, he died. He had arranged to get the driveway paved, and they put hot top down, and he was out there doing what he could with my brothers, rolling a big thing and putting down hot top on the driveway. And then he came in and he felt ill. It was very quick. He had pains in his stomach, and so we immediately called the Newton Wellesley Hospital, and they took him to the hospital. And there was a Dr. Carter, who lived up on Elliott Hill, and he was in charge of him. And so we thought that was wonderful, because it was Dr. Carter, and he would take care of him. And then the next thing we know, I came out of work, and I got there just as he was being wheeled to the ambulance, to the emergency room, to the
Operating room?
Yes, to be operated on. And I said goodbye to him and kissed him there, and I told him he was going to be all right. And so we came home, and the whole family was there in the kitchen, and waiting to hear, because he was going to be operated on, and wanted to hear how he was doing. And the telephone finally rang, and my brother Ted went to the phone, and he said, "Thank God." And we said, "Oh, Mama, he's good. He's all right. He's fine." Then all of a sudden, Ted said, "No, he's dead." And Ted didn't know what to say. He just got mixed up in his words, and he didn't mean to say "thank God," but he said it. But anyway, my father died right there, and it was a terrible thing that Dr. Carter he had a full meal before he went to the operating room, and that was what the food came all back the up into his mouth, and that's why he died.
And
anyway,
awful. No one was
prepared. It was terrible. It was terrible because he was a well man.
Right. When that happened, so that must have been difficult to.
Oh, it was a terrible time for us. And
who was living at home at that time?
I think we all were. No. Ted was living in Abington, and he worked for Pepper Sheet Company. And John, I don't know.
Is he working for Regis Paper?
Regis Paper, right? Yeah. Yeah, and he used to come every noontime to be with my mother.
And Dick was working with typewriters?
Dick was working, selling Remington brand typewriters.
Right. And Peggy might have been away.
And Peggy was off. She was in Framingham. She went to Framingham State College, and then she was very busy, and she was dating somebody, and she didn't marry that person. But anyway,
She was busy. So at some point, you met your husband. When was that?
I met my husband where I worked at 84 State Street as a paralegal, and we used to. There was a copy machine down on the floor, and I met my husband at the copy machine. He was making copies all the time. Copies. And I used to talk to him, and then he asked me, and first of all, to go out at noontime. We'd go over to the North End to Mass and go to get something to eat over at the North End. And so that was, and then my first date with my husband was, we went to the Mission Church on Wednesday night to a novena of perpetual help, and
now we know if you have a picture of Our Lady of Perpetual Help,
That's
you
right,
get a great
right.
indulgence
Right.
according to the Pope. So
right,
that's a very
according to
good
the
thing.
Pope. Yep, and so it went on for there, and my family met John, and they kind of liked him. And anyway, then John did all the proper things. He got the Hope test. That was the first thing he was supposed to do. And then he got the wedding ring, the engagement ring.
Oh no, he got other things first. What about the brush and the silver?
Oh yes, he got a brush with silver backing with my name on it, and then we did all the proper things.
Right.
But you were saying your father your family sort of liked him. What didn't they like about him?
Well, first of all, John was older than I was, and then second of all, my mother and I were very close, and it was very difficult for her. But she was a good sport. She didn't really object, because she got to kind of like him, and he would always include her in places that we were going.
And if she did object, would you have not married him? I mean, you needed to have her consent?
No, she didn't do it. I didn't need that because she didn't object.
Oh, okay.
But John's parents did. They didn't want him to leave New Hampshire because he was practicing law in New Hampshire, and John didn't want to leave either, and he did not want to live at 169 Elliott Street.
Oh boy.
And I had told her one time, no, I would never leave 169 Elliott Street and leave my mother. And so he kind of eased off, and he went up with Marguerite, his sister, and kind of talked to her, I guess, and she told me about it and said that he did decide that he'd go live with us, and he didn't really want to. But anyway.
What was Marguerite's position? Did she think he should or
No,
not?
she thought he should.
She
was
said,
glad
get out.
Glad to get rid of him. Yeah. And that's that. So I don't know what else I can say.
Well, then I was born and things got incredibly better.
No, and I was at work, and I had a doctor's appointment, and to because I was pregnant at the time, and the doctor called me and said, "Guess what? You're having twins." So I immediately, everyone in the office was all excited, and they got sent out for a cake and refreshments, and we had a real nice party celebrating the coming of the twins.
And talk about the big bargain that you got with the twins layette.
The big what?
A bargain. Wasn't there something?
Oh yes. I don't know how that happened.
There was some offer that if you bought a full layette and
in case you had twins,
What's a layette?
so it's a
you get everything for nothing.
right. So you got the crib and the
everything.
clothes and the diapers and the
All
whole
kinds of
everything to get ready for a baby.
But who's giving you this?
Because it wasn't.
It was Sears, wasn't it? Was it Sears? Who
I
was
think
it?
it was Sears, and it was, not usual to have twins at that time.
And so if you ordered a complete set and you ended up having twins, they would give you a second one for free.
Yeah, and I don't know. I almost think it was better than that, because.
Oh, maybe they give you both for free
I think
because
they
it
got
was.
everything, because we were overwhelmed with clothes and things. And then we had showers. I had several showers where people gave me things for these twins. And then when I had Beth a year and a half later, it was so ho-hum.
Oh, she's not going to like to hear that. I might have to take that out of the table. I don't know.
No, I was happy about it, but it was not an exciting time like the twins. They had to be.
And was your mother happy?
Oh, Mother was very happy, and actually, it worked out fine, because with the twins, I had one twin to feed her, give her a bottle. My mother had the other twin to give her a bottle,
Right.
and there was no argument there. So
That's great.
that's the way it went.
That's great.
It was very nice, and we had I have to say, we had a lovely and early beginning when I had the twins. And Beth was a little harder because
She was Beth.
because she had three to
Right.
put in a carriage,
Right.
and anyway.
Right.
John was not the most helpful person in the world, but he was all right.
Well, how do you feel now, having lived in this house for 91 years? What have you seen change around you?
You mean out beside the house or in the house? Oh, we arranged. We had people to come to give us an idea about how we could enlarge, and we did enlarge with the porch and so forth. We spent a lot of money doing that, and we were happy here. Yeah, no problem.
Beth was telling me this morning about your first trip to Boston and how you dressed when you went in there. You were very afraid. Maybe you could tell us that story.
The first trip I went, I had never gone to Boston, ever. And so I...
And you were going because you were starting work.
I was starting work. I was supposed to be there at 9 o'clock. And my brother Ted...
And first, how did you get selected for the job?
How did I get what?
How did you get selected for the job? How were you hired?
Oh, how did I hire? Well, Judge Weston came to the school, Newton South High School, rather, and he said to them, after he had interviewed me and different people, he said, "I want that girl as my secretary." And he was very important at that time because he was the head person at the city and the legal department at City Hall. And so...
What did you do to impress him? Why did he want you out of everyone? What did you do?
Talking with him, and also I had to. He gave me some dictation, which I did, and he was impressed with how I did it, and no, he just liked me, and but anyway, then that trip. That very first trip was, in the first place, I had to walk down to Elliott Station to get the tea to Boston. And doing that, I then had to worry about how you get off the train and then get to State Street. And so at this time, they said, well, there's some footmarks on the street all the way from the South Station to where you're going. And it says, I am going to join the Coast Guard. So I, with my head down, follow that. I am going to join the Coast Guard. And all the way to 84 State Street. And that's how I got there.
But how were you dressed? Beth said there was something about the way you dressed.
Well, I was dressed, I don't know.
You had gloves.
Oh, yes, and a hat.
But what were the gloves?
I had gloves, white gloves, and I had a hat. I was very well dressed.
But why the white gloves? Was that the style for the time?
Well, for the wealthy people it was, and I wanted to be the best, so I had the gloves, and I had the hat, and. Anyway.
And you found your way to 84 State Street.
I'm going to join the Coast Guard. Yeah.
And you walked your way there.
Yeah.
And you stayed at 84 State Street for how many decades?
Oh, and for a long time. And in fact, I finally retired from there.
Right, but over 60 years?
I really didn't retire. Because I would still do work at home, and I went to Mass Bay, and I got a couple of degrees there at Mass Bay, and also I went to Boston University at night, and my father used to meet me down at the Route 9, or when I got home at about 9 o'clock, and he'd have a dog with him, and with the dog and my father and I would walk up to home, and he did that every night for a long time while I was at Boston University.
Well, Kathy always said if you had went to law school, you would have been a lawyer.
I would have. I certainly would have. Because I took, Judge Weston paid for my paralegal studies, and it would have been very easy for me to be a lawyer.
You did a lot of real estate transactions. You passed papers for the bank.
Right. I was in charge of people buying and selling their houses and getting mortgages.
And doing tax returns, complicated tax situations.
No, a lot of tax work. I don't know. I did the best I could.
You did a great job.
That's it. Is that enough, John?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other stories you might want to tell, or do you have any stories?
Maybe she does, but how about we take a break?
Yeah, you know what? Well, I'll shut this off now.
How about we take a break and we can do this again another time?